Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or
Hello,
good night.
guys.
Wherever you are. I'm Michael from community team at Elastic. So today we will have this virtual meetups and welcome to this one. Today we are very happy to have two speakers. The first speaker is Sonia Goyo, and her talk will be data mastering at scale with AI and Elasticsearch. So after Sonia, so we will have Vivek Pimarwat. So his topic is a smart analysis using Elasticsearch. So if you have any questions, you can just leave your question in the chat window. So our speaker will answer them during the speech or after all the sessions. Okay, so Sunil, I think you can start now. So now we have already like 20 attendees, so we'll have more, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Michael. Very excited to be talking to this bunch of Elastic enthusiasts. And I will be presenting some of the work that we're doing and how Elastic becomes a part of a core part of what we're doing. Let me start sharing my screen.
No, I can. Yes, I can now.
So I hope it's all visible to everybody.
Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's kind of jump into, a bit background about myself. My name is Sonal. I'm the founder of Affix. We are a startup using AI to solve core data problems at the data quality level, at the data unification level. And I will tell you more about some of the challenges that we face and how we leverage Elastic for that. Until recently, I was a member of the program committee for O'Reilly Strata, Data and AI. I hope some of you have attended those conferences. I've also been speaking at the Spark Summit, DataCon LA, and other conferences. I graduated way back in '98, so approximately 20, 25 years, 23 years of industry experience in different domains like investment banking, telecom, and been working on data-related products using machine learning and AI for quite some time. In terms of what we will be covering today, we will be talking about, how this problem, this data mastering problem, I mean, really kind of begins in an organization. What is really the background behind it? How is it useful? And then I will cover some issues that, traditional approaches in data mastering can actually backfire. And then how AI and Elastic, a combination of those, can actually build out a nice solution to these problems. Okay, so on to data silos. Somebody who's been working with large enterprises, I think some of you would actually resonate with what I'm talking about here. So this is actually the heart of the problem, where there are like if you just talk about a usual way in which data is stored and managed in an organization, when the company grows, its data systems also grow. And then to take care of a business line or to manage a product or to handle a new territory, a team of people typically would in an organization would be working together. So this team, which is working on a specific problem, would need specific tools to save and manipulate their own data. They may prefer a homegrown CRM or a spreadsheet over the corporate Salesforce. And then for the specific product lines, they will also build a few custom applications. The supply chain systems, especially in different geographies, like if it's a multinational, the supply chain systems would be different from the parent organization. And there would be a mix and match of, what the corporate is doing at a headquarter level, to what it is doing at a branch level, to what it is doing at a departmental level. And it's a mix and match, and it is necessary for, smooth operations, for it to work well, for the company to deliver results. These silos are very important for operational efficiency. So as I was mentioning, I mean, these silos can actually be a result of, multiple factors. This could be departmental wise roles and responsibilities, just the way the company is structured. That can also lead to data silos. Data silos means data information being saved in a single application without it really communicating to other applications. Then there are geographic boundaries and regulations. For example, data locality might be one reason that the data is not really interlinked with other applications or other data systems in other geographies. Then there are, it may just be, technical, that you have a specific ERP or a CRM system whose APIs do not lend itself very easily to integrating with other data systems. So as an example, like if you look at, customer data in a typical organization would be saved across multiple systems, and each of these systems would be actually holding bits and pieces of the customer journey and the interaction with the enterprise. So if you have a web store, so it's the web data store, then if you have a retail store, it could be actually in-store data. Then there could be product-wise data stores, a lot of email marketing data, then data that could be acquired through external databases or through mergers and acquisitions. And if we're looking at this is looking like 6 or 7 systems, but typically if you look at large organizations, there was a study which was done in 2017, and even the average marketing department was using 16 different tech platforms. So you can just imagine the scale at which the silos happen. There's like data just spread across all these multiple systems. Now, similarly in procurement, what happens is that, there are multiple stakeholders and there are various kinds of systems. The vendor is typically registered in an ERP, then specifications are submitted and approved in another system. The vendor premises are inspected and compliance is done by another team. So they have their own processes and their own application database. And then contracting and legal are also involved. So then they bring in their additional data systems. And then the delivery team that approves the vendor supplies is also another actor with its own systems. So even procurement systems, there would be multiple procurement systems, and vendor and supplies information would actually be spread across all these different systems. So essentially what happens is that, these application systems, these ERPs, these CRMs are good. They are, they help us achieve our tasks, and they are critical to business functioning and productivity. However, the way it goes in all teams or as an individual, there is as much as you can do alone, and there's definitely beauty in the unification. Which leads us to data mastering, where what people realize is that you can derive a lot more value from your data when you can combine these unit specific data systems or data silos. In the case of the customer data that I mentioned, we can actually join and merge customer data across different product lines and learn buyer propensity. And once we have this customer journey mapped out, once we have this customer data unified, we can discover opportunities to cross-sell and to upsell, and we can build personalized communication and targeted channels. So I think just by breaking in the customer data across different systems, there's a whole lot of customer analytics which you can power by having all the data in one place, by having a unified view of your customer. So right from onboarding customers faster, knowing more about them, understanding their preferences, predicting what you can actually do for them. So all of that can increase sales effectiveness and delight the customer by anticipating their needs and providing for their needs. Similarly, I mean, for other systems, like for products, for vendors, for partners, I think for each core entity that the business deals with, the data mastering actually becomes important, because it becomes like the fundamental layer over which you build your risk, over which you build your compliance, over which you build your customer 360, and just become operationally far more efficient, serve your customer better, and comply with rules and regulations. So I'll give you some examples where this data mastering is needed. One is like healthcare, where every time a new like healthcare companies, typically they will do a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and they will acquire, whenever they acquire a new healthcare provider, they will also inherit new EMR systems along with different physician credentialing systems. And although you want to really get all the hospitals onto a centralized EMR system, it is actually difficult, and you have to reconcile the patient data to move to a standardized system. So you have to actually build a trusted source of patient data that would enable better continuity of care throughout the network of existing EMR systems. And so you actually want to, so healthcare companies want to actually master their patient data across its different facilities, across its different services, and build those out for the right kind of services to serve their patients better. Now, in terms of general insurance, you actually completely, the insurance companies really need to understand their customer to build out a single customer view. Risk and compliance, especially for insurance companies in the whole of BFSI sector, tends to be a big, these tend to be heavily regulated industries. So understanding if a customer has bought home, auto, and general insurance from you, and what kind of risk propensity do you have if you are servicing multiple members in the household, or what kind of outlay do you have, what kind of other products you can sell to them, becomes really, really very important. So again, data mastering in general insurance also becomes very critical. Now, in the case of automotive, I mean, so I'm taking the cases of different industries, but all of them, because the core entities that any organization would deal with, customers or vendors or suppliers, so this problem of data mastering actually, kind of translates to different systems and to different industries. So in automotive, again, I mean, you have, massive amounts of customer data, varying in quality, spread across different silos. And this makes, so you have to actually, master the customer data to understand and improve your sales and marketing, to launch better products, to reach out to customers when you launch your new products, to increase customer satisfaction, and to forecast demand, which becomes very important in heavy industries. So if you have, if you don't have a consistent view of your customer, the ability to innovate and the ability to satisfy the expectations of the customers reduces. So data mastering, again, in automotive becomes very important. And similarly, I think for other industries like oil and gas, you do well data mastering to understand investment decisions. Well, data is, each well actually is a big asset, and understanding its health and extraction capabilities is critical. So meshing internal data with external data on the well becomes really, really important. And I can go on about, other industries like life sciences, where you do payer, provider, and patient mastering. There are compliances in terms of life sciences companies. What kind of interactions do they have with healthcare providers? So compliances like Sunshine Act make it important to master the data and to bring it out in one place. And so on in financial services. So I think in a nutshell, when we are looking at data mastering, basically what we're saying is that data mastering helps us to increase our revenues, reduce our costs, reduce our risks while staying compliant. And there is tremendous value in integrating these data silos across various industries. And I think one thing to kind of consider is that, we're not breaking these data silos. We are not, taking away these systems. We are saying that these systems, which are needed for operations, they continue to be there. But we actually can master the data. We can integrate this data. We can overlay our operational data with this mastered layer and build out holistic views, which can serve for a lot of our analytic reporting and operational use cases. So we augment our operational data with this mastered view, and that is where we can operate far more effectively. Now, I've talked about what are the needs for data mastering, but let's look at what are the challenges, and then what led us to using the current stack, to building the current stack, which involves Elastic, that we are doing. So one is clearly, I mean, in terms of just the business challenges, who really owns the data, how do different departments coordinate with each other, how do you maintain data quality across the different departments, so consistently saving data in the same kind of format, in the same kind of address notations, so across geographies or across departments, that becomes important. So process in terms of how data is captured, in terms of how data is managed, in terms of how data is mastered, becomes very important. But for this meetup, let's get more into, I think, the technical challenges. So let's say, we have a customer, and we are getting that customer data integrated across 3 different systems. So 3 different silos where the customer data is saved, and humanly, actually, you can see that this is kind of all representing the same customer. But for a computer without a unique key, actually, it is very difficult to figure out whether they are really referring to the same entity. So I am pointing out some differences here in terms of, what the missing first name, or the salutation, or a typo, or different ways in which addresses would be represented, or the house number being completely different. And telephones all the time, they could be represented in different formats. Leading and trailing spaces, typos again. So all this, I mean, together makes it, across, and these are just 4 fields and 3 records. But if we look at it, solving this problem at scale, it quickly becomes a big challenge. So when we talk about this, we'll kind of focus not really on getting the data in and publishing the data out, but more about the core data mastering processes here, which are massaging the data so that it can be matched, it can be merged, and it can be governed. Now, the case that I showed to you, which was just 3 records, the moment where you have more systems, or you have more number of records, this becomes a complete, even at a small scale of 10,000 records, you actually end up, comparing every record with every other record, and completely blows up as we scale from 10,000 to 100,000 to 1 million records. And even at small data sizes, this becomes a real big problem to solve, because the number of comparisons that are needed to unify these attributes completely, just quadratically keeps increasing. So what is it that we could kind of look at in terms of a nice solution, in terms of being able to handle these different entities, doing it at scale, and doing it elegantly without very little effort, So one is obviously, I mean, we could write an if-then-else logic. We could say that if some of these fields are matching with each other, Elastic also has a function for fuzzy matching, and we can say that these records actually belong to the same individual. But then crafting these rules would actually, take a lot of time across all these attributes, and it will also not scale to the kind of data volumes that we typically see. Now, for doing something like that, if you have to, kind of hard code or do a rule-based thing, there is a lot of data standardization that needs to happen. There is a lot of definition in terms of which attribute to have give more importance to, which attributes to look at first, which attributes combinations actually define what is really, the same across different records, to call it the same individual or the same entity. So this, as we try to do it, quickly becomes a scale problem, because we have to look at a variety of mastered entities, as I was mentioning, right from customer data to well data to supplier data to parts data. This problem manifests itself across different kinds of entities. So if we are building a system, we probably need to be able to handle all that variety. Then just the sheer number of records, as I was telling you in terms of the comparisons that need to be done, that is actually a big deterrent. And quickly what happens is that even when companies, when they start on a data mastering journey, they will quickly do 1 or 2 domains or 1 or 2 core systems. Those data silos, they would integrate, but that itself becomes such a big project, such a big task, that it kind of drops off, and you kind of still live with it, and it kind of just becomes like a dream that you want to aspire to, but not really able to get there. And there's a lot of effort in terms of crafting out those rules, configuring them, and getting them to scale to the number of data sources. So it becomes challenging in all fronts, at all fronts. So in terms of what we can do better for a problem which is very core to most enterprise systems, every medium to large enterprise faces, maybe there are different ways of solving this, and that's one approach that I'm going to outline today to you. So let's kind of start with a clean slate. Let's just forget what is the traditional way of how this is done, and look at how we can actually apply AI to solving this problem. So kind of just put our AI hat on and try to see if that superpower can actually be useful in this kind of a scenario where there's a lot of moving parts. Now, typically when we look at applying AI, how do we really apply AI? We have some training data to learn from. We build representations from that data. So we learn, what are the patterns in the data, and then you build a model that fits the data. So when we look at training data, that's data for which we already know the results. We already know whether it's a match, whether it belongs, what kind of category this record belongs to, and then we can learn from that. Then we can build representations from that data. So in typical AI systems, that's called feature engineering, where you actually, say you have a pair of records which are actually similar, and you can say that one feature for that could be how many characters are similar to each other, or if you have spend classification, like it could be the word vectors of the supplies. So there could be different features which you can gather from the data and get that to build a model. And essentially, when we are saying a model is just an algorithm which kind of learns to fit the data. So it can, given the features, it can make a prediction that this data is actually fitting into this. And eventually, once these models are kind of production ready, you actually build a data pipeline which does this automatically. The training data is already there. So the model is there. The data pipeline would derive the features from the raw data and apply the model and actually predict it. Now, AI, I mean, it's kind of fashionable right now to just apply AI to every problem. But I would, say that every problem is not really an AI problem, and we need to really think hard that it's not really a silver bullet. We have to make sure that the data has inherent patterns that, say that this is that you can derive patterns from. So one problem that we see in data mastering is that really, I mean, when we look at suppliers and we want to say that this supplier is a parent company of this other supplier. I mean, that is something that's actually a knowledge base. That's not something that, just by looking at the column data, an AI can predict subsidiary or master ownership information. So those kind of problems definitely we cannot actually solve through AI. So in terms of, who is reporting to whom, who is subsidiary of whom, those kind of master data challenges, definitely we cannot actually solve through AI. So we have to be prudent in terms of, justifying our effort and our cost to make sure that when we are building a model, it's something that can be repeated, that can be repeatable problem. The data is representative enough, and if we have enough training data to be able to manage a production pipeline for this. Now, how do we really get training data? I mean, training data is, something that is really critical to building your AI-based models. And like, one is that you could be lucky, right? You have some training data from previous efforts. Somebody has done some kind of a crowdsourced approach, and you actually have, a lot of data through which you can actually learn. But in most cases, that really doesn't happen. So we have to have ways in which we can build up training data very fast. And there are two techniques, and there are actually a lot more other techniques that can be used. But two things that we are kind of very bullish about at my startup are active learning, where instead of building training data, the system itself would pick out some edge pairs, edge cases, and ask the user to label them. So and then so it will pick out samples. So instead of just blindly labeling 100,000 or 200,000 pairs or data sets, the active learning algorithm would pick out only select pieces, and you can label them, and from there you can train a classifier or a clustering algorithm. So that is one. Or you can actually look at something like weak supervision, where a lot of noisy functions can be coded, and together those functions are not actually very accurate. So I can say, so in the case of, when I was showing you the data matching example, we could say that if the first name matches and the last name matches, it is probably a match. That may not hold for all the scenarios, but we can have, similar functions like if the date of birth matches and the SSN matches, it's probably a match. And then together, the weak supervision algorithms will be able to cancel out the noise from these labels and build out a decently performant model. So those are actually some areas that can be looked at. So in terms of, how AI can actually be applied to data mastering, one is just the sheer data schema integration, where data is actually coming in from different sources, and the schemas are widely different. The last name in one source can be L name in another. In the third source, it can actually be a combination of first name, last name together as full name. So AI can actually be used to predict that. Then just the data matching, deduplication, and the entity consolidation piece that I talked to you about. Product and supplies classification in terms of, whether the supply is actually a stationary, whether it is a part to a product, that can actually be done. And then just improving data quality in terms of what fields are missing, in terms of what can be a probable right entry to a particular attribute. Those are some areas where I think AI can actually add a lot of value. So I'll kind of talk to you about the data matching piece, where we actually heavily use Elastic, and which uses a combination of AI based technologies as well, where we actually do clustering and classification. So to break down the scale of the problem, we actually cluster similar records together, and then we classify which records actually are indeed true matches or not. And to build out these models, we actually use active learning. So we answer a few yes/no questions to build the training data. And then this training data is actually used to tune the feature weights and importance of columns. So this is how it looks like. So here, I mean, a user is actually, the system through active learning is picking out a few pairs and asking the user to label. So here 65 pairs have actually been labeled, out of which 38 were non-matches, 24 were matches. The user was not sure about 3. And based on that, a similarity model has actually been built. A couple of clustering and classification models have been built, and they can actually integrate the entire data silos together. So, you know, like if you remember when I was talking about matching, I talked that it's like a crazy scale problem. And, you know, even to do 10, if you remember, even to do those 10,000 comparisons, it actually becomes a real bad scale problem. So, so I mean, those are, I mean, the kind of models that we're learning. First is what we are learning is that, you know, we will cluster only similar records together. And then once we've clustered near similar records together, we will learn to predict with greater accuracy which ones are indeed true matches. And when we do something like this, it's actually, you know, really helps us that we don't, if we apply AI to something like this, we really don't need to do any profiling, all the data standardization, all the fuzzy match key, edit distances, and other things that we would actually need to hand code. We really don't need to do that because the system can actually take care of all of them. Similarly, for product and supplies classification, we could actually build word vectors and predict, you know, what supply is it actually part of this. And typically, like, you know, schema mapping that is done by mapping records from the source to the target or across different source systems. So instead of doing something like this, the system can actually predict that, you know, by contents of the first name, you can map the primary column, primary contact, the input column, primary contact, to the output column, first name, looking at the contents. So I will, like, kind of, you know, given this background in terms of, you know, how AI is used, I will now jump on to, you know, how we started, how we discovered Elastic and how we started using Elastic. So on to our product journey. We started as a Spark, you know, Spark-based data pipelines. So the first cut of our product was pretty simple in terms of we would actually, the AI part was there, but we would train everything on the back end. There was no GUI, no front end, no active learning. We kind of expected that the user already had training data. So we would build our models from that training data. And there would be just Spark-based data pipelines that would read from HDFS and write to HDFS. And we also had connectors that if a customer wanted, you know, for us to be able to write to some other source or sync, pick up from some other system, we could do that. But primary, the core of the system was actually just, you know, the Spark-based data pipelines, where you actually just got the data and you predicted that these are actually belonging to the same customer, and these records can be clustered together, and we would be just sitting in part of the pipeline. But then what we realized is that, you know, that it's not sufficient. I mean, there are so many use cases or so many problems that the customer, because they're not able to actually view what data is flowing in, we actually had to have, you know, some kind of a front end to orchestrate the pipelines, to be able to, you know, maybe add in more data through CSVs or Excel files. And for that, we quickly needed to to build a GUI. Now, building a front end to orchestrate these pipelines became challenging because this data was large scale data. So reading from HDFS and writing to HDFS, although you can do from the back end, but then how do you really display it on the front end? I think that's where the problem started happening for us when we went on to the product version 1.0. Realized that I mean, we could have a front end to orchestrate the pipelines. We could say that this is a data source and this is the data sink, but still at a record level we could not really show results, and that became very, very important going forward. So as I was mentioning that although the 1.0 was a big improvement over the initial version, and we had some semblance of a GUI, but that front end was not really enough to be able to train the system to be able to view at a record level what is happening. And we started feeling the need for user interaction at the front end in terms of active learning, in terms of whether if it's not a right match, or if the user wants to do something with the results, how to really do they handle it. And this became a big point, big problem for us, serving data from HDFS. That was really not possible. So in terms of product 2.0, some of the things that we kind of started thinking about in terms of how do we really want to build a good user experience, how do we want to give interaction at the record level, and to be able to do it at scale. That those became right, the key things that drove our architecture. And I think one thing that also has been a big decision point for us is that the schema, because we are building the tool, we really don't know the schema beforehand. So it's unlike, like if we are dealing with internal data, typically we know what attributes we have to work with. But in our case, we really don't know to be able to service all kinds of use cases. For us, the schema is a black box. I mean, we really don't understand. Maybe the customer doesn't have a phone number as one of the fields, or the customer doesn't bring in customer data, but they bring in supplier data, which has its own sets of attributes. So we have to have a system which can actually address, all these challenges in terms of being able to do real time, in terms of being able to provide user interaction, in terms of being able to scale to large volumes of data, and continue to give that interaction at the front end, and to be able to deal with any kind of schema coming from any kind of format. So when we started looking at that, I mean, I think that the first thought was that, let's keep an RDBMS. Let's persist our data in RDBMS, keeps the stack very simple, and we can actually just manage it through that. But that first thought obviously immediately kind of, got shot down, because one is in RDBMS, how do you really save different varieties of data types of entities? So the schemas are all the time varying. So how do you really do that? Then how do you really scale this? Because the data volumes, although these data volumes, when you're looking at typical data mastering, they do not tend to be the petabyte scale of data that is present in unstructured text, or in video, or in images, or documents. But at the same time, just to the sheer kind of comparisons that we make, the scale is definitely a challenge there. And then we also needed to provide search, which the RDBMS by itself would never ever be able to kind of deliver on. So in the next iteration, we actually, kind of looked at NoSQL databases. I think the major major pros and the major reasons why we looked at NoSQL database was the schemaless thing and the ability to scale. So that led us to, kind of looking at Cassandra and HBase. And we did a couple of proof of concepts around those while we were, architecting. So it was not just plain architecture on paper. We really went ahead and, implemented some core functionality. And we realized that, although the NoSQL was good at some of the things that we wanted to give, but we had a lot of trouble, again, satisfying the other use cases in terms of transactions, in terms of what user has marked a record as a match or a non-match, in terms of being able to just rapidly search across the system and be able to give those results. So that became challenging, and we realized that NoSQL by itself will not really be able to solve our problem. So finally, at the version of the product that we are on, we have now taken a different approach to this whole problem. So we continue to have Spark-based pipelines. They feed into the RDBMS and Elastic. The relational database is used more as a meta store of what schema of a particular data source do we have, who are the users, what kind of checks and balances the users are doing. But all the data, actually all of the data that is coming on the front end, every single record is now persisted into Elastic. And that is where we are able to manage the scale and the search. So whatever, so even when we are consuming data from a Parquet or an Avro or through a Cassandra or through any source system, we write the data to Elastic in its JSON format, and we use that to power our front end. And it makes our stack really simple. It makes our stack very scalable. It gives us search out of the box. And with the RDBMS, we can actually manage those transactions. So it becomes, finally, I mean, I think we're at the sweet spot where I think we are leveraging both the RDBMS and the Elastic for their core strengths, and able to kind of do all the features that we really wanted to do. And I think one thing where Elastic has really helped us is that the REST API that comes in terms of the querying, in terms of the lookups, is actually a big bonus for us, because we're not actually having to do any coding for that. The user can actually look up their data from the REST API provided through Elastic. So in terms of like this data that I was mentioning about, so all this information is now actually saved in Elastic. The cluster information is saved in the RDBMS as well. So when somebody does a remove or splits some record to a new cluster or rejects a cluster, this information would be saved in the RDBMS, also persisted to Elastic. And that is how actually we are able to manage the view as well as the transactions. Now, in terms of search, I think it becomes very interesting, because this is one very big feature that we needed to provide. And this, just by using Elastic, actually becomes easy, because we have the records persisted with their cluster. And when somebody looks at Harvard, so you actually, the system actually found the first top record, and we kind of add we kind of rewrite the query. So when somebody finds a search string in Elastic, we look up all the records which belong to the same cluster and show them on the front end. So we are able to show, the 6 linked records in the cluster along with the actual record, and that becomes valuable. So just by layering our search on top of Elastic, it becomes really, really very easy to support a far deeper level of querying and to bring out the entity in totality. So in the works, some of the stuff that we are also looking at in terms of leveraging Elastic even more is writing an Elastic plugin. So if there is real-time data that is coming in, and somebody wants to do a lookup on all the product attributes, on all the customer attributes, or all the record attributes, we can actually service this through Elastic. So that is pretty much what I wanted to cover today. And happy to take any questions either right now or post Vivek's talk.
Thank you, Sonia, also for the sharing. So I don't see question in the chat window, so we will have the combined Q&A at the end. So if you have a question, you still have time to ask. I'm happy to introduce Vivek, our second speaker. His topic is the smart analysis using Elasticsearch. Hey, Vivek.
Yeah.
Now it's your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Michael and Arvind. Thank you for hosting the Elasticsearch meetup and on the community of Elasticsearch. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really very super excited to present my talk on the smart analysis using Elasticsearch. Thank you again, all of us attending the talk. Yeah, so let me introduce you myself. So I am Vivek Pemawat. I work at Cloudera in the infrastructure and tools team. As a staff engineer, I'm working there and leading multiple projects related with the tooling. Yeah, so the agenda for our today's talk is to understand how we build and use the process of doing a root cause failure analysis and how we are ingesting and storing the logs in Elasticsearch for our system test and end-to-end runs. And the third thing is how we learn from the data and suggest the root cause of failure analysis. Then using the Elasticsearch and Kibana, how we build the slice log view. And then further we'll go over the deployment story we have done for the OCP on the OCP and how we are doing the streaming of logs for the microservices using the Elasticsearch. Yeah, first we'll go to the background of the problem. So at Cloudera, we have lots of automated test runs on the daily basis to certify the product. And it becomes very difficult for engineering to analyze and trace the failures manually on the daily basis. So we came up with a smart analysis tool which solves the problem of finding the root cause analysis of the failures. Yeah. So we'll tell you what was the approach without that tool and then what we did with the smart analysis tool. So the approach initially we had is we used to have a dashboard where we have the log server URL and our engineering team used to go there and then check for a run, what are the errors from the logs and then check the test framework log and check the services log. Like so our platform is basically Hadoop based. So we have to check the multiple services like HDFS, Yarn, MapReduce, and then other services as well, and the infrastructure logs as well. And this we have to repeat multiple times. I mean, for multiple test cases, we have to repeat this activity. So it was a tedious manual task to do a failure analysis. And finally, user has to do triaging and update the Jira also in the dashboard. So the whole set of activity is repeated over the period of time, over the years. And so we have come up with the smart analysis solution and which actually uses intelligently Elasticsearch to solve this problem. Yeah. So apart from these problems which are discussed, the other problems like downloading the logs from the log server, searching the errors from the files, and updating the manual activity. Like when you find out, okay, this is the root cause of the issue and this is the Jira, then you update in the Jira basic in the dashboard. Okay, this is the root cause. And like this, there are a lot of other problems. Like manually, you have to check and user ID and then find out the root cause. So, and this is on the daily basis for the engineering team basically. So to solve this, we have the smart analysis tool now. I will just first go the basics of Elasticsearch and the operational design we have come up for the smart analysis tool. So what is actually Elasticsearch? Elasticsearch is basically a real-time distributed and open source full text search and analytics engine. So you can easily search on the text which is not possible with the MySQL or MongoDB as well. I mean, when you have to run and you store the logs on a scale, it's not possible to search logs on the NoSQL database like MySQL and the SQL database like MySQL and NoSQL like MongoDB. And the beauty of the Elasticsearch is you can integrate with your system easily using the RESTful APIs and build your own solution. So why we have used Elasticsearch? Our problem is basically very scalable because we have terabytes of log on the daily basis to store and to search. So it's not easy to keep your system live, I mean, searchable on the text. So Elasticsearch was fulfilling our requirement like to scalability, it's horizontally scalable and it uses sharding so you can put your indexes into multiple shards and then easily scale. And the important thing is you don't know the future actually. You have multiple requirements to fill and there are a lot of changes in your schema. So it's schema free, which is also, I mean, automatically detects the schema and index the data and make it searchable. So which is really very useful. And the most important, the active community. The community is very active. I mean, on the forums, on the tools and the plugin support. I mean, it's a very active community and it's really useful to learn from the community easily. Apart from this, there's a RESTful APIs. I mean, you can integrate with your system using the REST APIs and the multi-tenancy support, basically multiple indexes. So there are multiple projects. You can easily manage multiple indexes. Not only this, you can manage indexes with the timestamp and the day wise also for the cleanup. So the data cleanup is also very easy because at the end of the, I mean, since we are storing logs, so we have to automatically purge the data also. So the data cleanup, all this activity becomes very tedious and it sometimes blocks the whole system also while doing cleanup. So that we faced in the Solar. So it was a really very good experience with the Elasticsearch because you can do data cleanup, you can manage your indexes with the dates and timestamp and automatically do cleanup, and you can query the data and view your logs in the Kibana. So Kibana is a very good tool with the Elasticsearch integration. So you can use the timestamp based log lines. Yeah. Some of the basic concepts will go with the Elasticsearch, like what is a cluster? So, and what are the indexes, shards? So we'll go to this and then we'll see how we have come up with the solution using the Elasticsearch. So cluster is basically a collection of nodes where you can actually do indexing and searching on all the nodes of the entire data. And the index is basically you can have different type of documents and their properties. So index is the concept of shards to improve the performance, and you can store your data into index and then search it. And on the lowest level, you have the document. So document is basically a collection of fields. So like a table you have and you have multiple columns. So document you have the multiple fields and you can store your data. And shard is basically when you have a very heavy index, you can shard your, I mean, you can split your indexes into multiple shards and basically horizontally, I mean, you can scale easily. And uh, it's I mean it's acceptable that many times our hard disk goes down and infrastructure go down, nodes are going down, so replication is much needed. So Elasticsearch supports replication, which actually helps us to put your system in HA. And not only this, it improves performance also. By providing the replication, you can improve your performance in searching. Yeah, just a small snapshot which shows the mapping of MySQL with Elasticsearch. I mean, in MySQL we have database, here we have index. On the MySQL we have table, here we have type, and then there are rows. So we have document here in the Elasticsearch. On the column side we have columns in MySQL. Then we have field here, And the schema of MySQL is defined as a mapping here, and the indexes are basically indexing here. Everything is indexed in the Elasticsearch. Yeah, on the query side, there is a query DSL in the Elasticsearch. Yeah. So now how we are solving the problem of scalability? So using sharding, so we have a lot of data in a single index. So what we do is basically we have a multiple shards for an index, and then it solves the problem of splitting the data into multiple nodes and make it scalable. Now, the fault tolerance. Now, how we are handling fault tolerance is basically we have set up the replication for the data. So, with using the replication, we are able to achieve the fault tolerance. And throughput is basically you have the parallelization of queries running on the multiple shards. So and replicas. So that becomes the query becomes fast. So we'll discuss about the technology stack overall we have. So this is a complete operational design diagram we have for the our smart analysis tool we have developed. On the left, there are ST pods. So we run our whole infrastructure on the Kubernetes based OCP cloud. So we have thousands of jobs running on the daily basis, which actually uploads terabytes of logs on the S3. So on the left, you can see we have ST pods, which actually upload the logs on the S3. And what we do is basically for each of the ST pods, we have basically a single run. So we submit the request using the REST API and put into the RabbitMQ. And then there is a processing engine basically which processes the data from the RabbitMQ, and then it analyzes the data and puts into the Elasticsearch, and also in the MongoDB the process data. And finally, to the user we have the UI service, basically UI to view the data and analyze the data and automate the process of doing failure analysis. Yeah, so on the deployment story, we are using Red Hat based OpenShift cloud basically, and that solves the problem of like keeping your system, I mean your complete installation using the Helm charts, and maintaining that also it's very easy. Upgrading the system is also easily manageable using the OpenShift container platform. Yeah, so that's about the deployment, and we are using Elasticsearch for all the storage of logs and errors and exceptions, and also search on those. RabbitMQ we use for for all the requests which we need to process. All the requests are being put into the RabbitMQ. Yeah, and to stream the logs to the Elasticsearch, we are using Fluentd. And so Fluentd is basically a daemon which actually runs in the OCP cloud, and it streams the logs to the Elasticsearch. So which is useful for doing the analysis what jobs have been failed or passed, data on those. Not only these, the microservices which we are running, also we store the logs in the Elasticsearch using the Fluentd. So this is basically a log collector for us, and the storage is basically Elasticsearch. Yeah, so this is a summary of the technologies we have used for the deployment side. We have the Red Hat based OCP, and all the jobs which are needs to be processed are being stored in the RabbitMQ. And for storing logs and errors, we have the Elasticsearch, and the process data is stored on the MongoDB. And we actually run all our jobs as a Kubernetes jobs, and the raw data is stored on the S3, all the logs, and Kibana is used to view the logs, slice logs. Yeah, so we'll move to the demo now. So here we have our application. So we can see, okay, there are 5 test cases are being failed, and out of these 4 test cases are failed because of the same reason. Yeah, so this actually all we have achieved using the Elasticsearch. I mean the correlation, all we have achieved in Elasticsearch. So we are able to correlate, okay, these are the similar issues, and we show the, okay, these similar issues are because of the same issue, same reason, same error. Now, this is our ingestion pipeline overall we have. So first we download the logs, and then we parse the logs, and then we normalize the logs, then categorization of logs, then ingestion of data to the Elasticsearch. Now, how we learn from the data using Elasticsearch? So we have the errors. And whenever our QA team, basically testing team, files a Jira and they do triaging, they basically tag, okay, this is the issue and the attached error using the smart analysis tool. So next time what we do is, next time when the same issue occurs, we auto pre-populate, okay, this is the root cause of the issue. This might be a probable reason for your issue. And how we do is basically we leverage the Elasticsearch full text search. So all our errors and exception data is stored in the Elasticsearch, so it becomes very easy to query the data on the Elasticsearch and suggest the data and suggest using the scoring of the Elasticsearch. So using the full text search, we query the data, find out in the real time, okay, this is the relevant nearby errors or JIRAs we have, and suggest
it's 15 hours
and suggest the user basically this is the root cause of the issue. Yeah, so this is a snapshot we have for our application where for an error, okay, these are the suggested JIRAs we have. And on the basis of the score given by the Elasticsearch, we actually suggest a JIRA. So this actually solves the problem of, storing the data, finding the data, and then finding the relevant data also. And not only this, actually, storing the data, cleanup is also more oftenly, I mean, it's very hard to implement the cleanup also. So with the Solar, we face a lot of issues. I mean, our whole system goes down many times and we face sometimes. But with the Elasticsearch, we are happily, I mean, able to delete the data, the previous data, and keep the relevant data in our system. Yeah. Now, we leverage the UI of Kibana to provide the UI to view the time slice logs. So what we do is basically after we ingest the data, the logs to the Elasticsearch, based on the timestamp of the failure of the test cases, we basically show, okay, these are these is the sliced logs for your test case. So this really helps to view the logs on a test case level. Okay, when you're running multiple test cases and you want to see the logs for a particular test case, and in that window for all the services, Elasticsearch really helps to do that with the Kibana UI. Yeah, that's all from my side. Questions and answers? Q&A? Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? So you can type in the chat window, or you can just unmute and use your microphone. Vivek and Sonia are still online, so waiting for the questions. Let's wait for 1 more minute. No more questions. We can finish this meetup today. So last call. Any questions? A recording of this meetup will be posted at the Elastic YouTube channel. You can view the. Okay, we have questions from Usman. You can unmute. Or...
Vivek. Hi, Vivek.
Yeah, hi, Usman.
Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to ask you a question. Actually, during your presentation, you told that index would be split into shards. If this shard will be definitely distributed to all the nodes, or it would be distributed to only one or two nodes. For example, if there are 4 data nodes, if the shard will distribute to all nodes, and if this is happening, then don't you think that it is the wastage of storage?
Yeah, I mean, this is trade-off actually when you want to achieve the replication, when you want to achieve the HA. With the replication, I mean, the data will be stored multiple times, but with the period time when you see, okay, when the one is left and some of the node goes down, it really helps actually. So it's a trade-off, but yeah. And by the way, we don't need to manage all this automatically sharding. I mean, automatically allocation to the nodes is by the Elasticsearch stack. So that really helps. Yeah. Thank you for the good question, Usman. Any more questions?
Any more questions? No. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you our speaker, Kumo and Vivek. So see you in our next meetup. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.